Morning, Joe, and the Pro Fridays show. I'm rhyming all over the place right now, and we're ready to go. Except I have water, not coffee today. What up, big man?
Hey, you look not a lot better than last week, but it was impossible for you to look worse this week than you did last week.
That is true, man. Lots to talk about today. All hell broke loose in my house last night. I have to tell you why. Hold on. So, my daughter started a business, and she paints celebrities on T-shirts. The biggest boy band in the world, which is called Why Don't We? She met them a couple of months ago, and she painted their faces on clothing, and she handed all of them T-shirts. Last night, they appeared on some Disney World Christmas special, and one of the guys was actually wearing her shirt, which is a pretty big damn deal.
That's great. I actually saw your post on Facebook last night. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, and the thing was, my daughter was hysterical, as if she was meeting the Beatles or something. Here is a piece. See?
Nice.
And you can see her stuff at m2designs.ca. She has a John Lennon up, a Jerry Garcia, and she just finished a Bob Marley piece. m2designs.ca. She's 17 years old, and I couldn't be more excited. But my God, dude, she was crying. It was bedlam in my house.
That's
anyway, Dallas last night, pretty impressive, huh?
Was impressive. Happy to report we were on the Cowboys last night. You give me the better defense getting points at home. That's a recipe that I'm always going to subscribe to. So we got the nice win last night and changes everything in the NFC right now. Now the Rams, control things. They got the top spot back, and they're coming off their bye week this week. And basically going to Detroit might be another bye week going to play the Lions. But in Dallas takes command of the NFC East.
Yeah, and like a solid command. I mean, they've got Washington playing Philly this week in Philly. So, one can logically assume Philly has a very likely chance of winning that game. And then Dallas is really rolling. And it's amazing to me because they started the season off so bad. I was so unimpressed. And my opinion of their coach. I mean, I consider the guy a disaster.
Well, pure and simple, the change of the Cowboys, and everybody, was up in arms on how much they gave up to get Amari Cooper, giving up the first-round draft pick. But, Prez, he has changed this offense completely because now they have a true threat at wide receiver, which ends up opens the game up for Zeke Elliott now because they were stacking the line, daring Dak to throw, and they can't do that. And what happens whenever Amari Cooper runs routes, he's taking defenders with him. You got to respect the route. And if he goes deep, it clears out the defenses where if Zeke runs, once he breaks that first line of containment, instead of having a 5-yard gain, now they're becoming 10, 15, and 20-yard chunk plays, and it makes everything better. And Dak has more confidence now having a weapon that he can go to.
Agreed. Marco, we got a bunch of promos to give out today, and then we're going to talk some college football and some NFL. So I got 2 promos to give out. You've got 1. Let's get to it. The first thing I want to talk about is Bobby Liggs. You find him over at WagerTalk.com. He's a very famous ex-bookmaker, one of the most well-connected and colorful people you'll ever meet. I remember when he was in Vegas a few months ago with us, and God, what was he playing? Like $25,000 a hand at the blackjack? I mean, it was ridiculous, right?
It wasn't quite that much, but it was a large. They were playing high stakes, and they're crazy. Those guys, Bobby and Johnny, and some of the escapades, supposedly, and I don't believe these guys, but I got to check it out. They tell me that one of the famous strip clubs in Detroit that they attend has on Monday Night Football all-you-can-eat crab legs, and we're not talking snow crab. We're talking Alaskan king crab, all you can eat at a strip club, and those guys have frequented that place quite often.
They go
I have an open invitation to go.
They go for the crab legs.
Yeah, that's it.
Anyway,
it's like reading the articles in a Playboy magazine, right?
Anyway, Bobby had Dallas as well last night. Marco, his NFL record at WagerTalk.com this season is 31-17. Which is so ridiculous. Slightly over 65%. He has made 51% return on your money if you've been playing him since the beginning of the NFL season. And there's still, 6 weeks left, plus the playoffs. So I want to give out his entire NFL season and playoffs for only $199. Use the promo code Bobby, BOBBY, 199 at WagerTalk.com. That's Bobby, 199 at WagerTalk.com. $199 for his NFL season. And there's no reason to think this guy's going to hit the skids. I mean, he did incredible last year in NFL. He's rolling in college football. We are really lucky to have him. So head over to WagerTalk.com and use the promo code Bobby199. Marco, what do you got to give out?
Well, I've got a game tonight. If you guys are watching this video on Friday, we've got our Pac-12 championship game. Normally sells for $25, but because you're watching and having to look at Prez for 15 minutes, I figure you guys deserve a discount. And we're going to use coupon code MD for Marco DAngelo, MD10, and you can pick up my Pac-12 championship game tonight for just $10 when you enter that coupon code. And Prez, we've been over the last 8 days. It's basically been a 500 run for me. But the one thing that has stood out over the last 8 days is my daily top play. We've hit 6 of our last 8 daily top plays, and that is tonight's Pac-12 championship game, my daily top play.
So the promo code is MD10. Marco, before we get into football, could you spell MD, please?
I think it's M and then D. And then number 10.
Excellent stuff there, Marco. Okay, brother, let's get into some college football for tomorrow because, we've been talking about it all week. It's championship week. A bunch of us have actually given out UCF against Memphis, so let's not discuss that game. You can pick the game to talk about, but I'd like to talk a little bit about Alabama, Georgia, and also some Northwestern Ohio State. Let's start with Alabama and Georgia. Alabama, minus 12.5, rematch game. I got to believe that Georgia is going to pull out a whole lot of tricks this Saturday. I think this team is going to empty the kitchen sink, if you will. And although I don't play against Tom Brady and I don't play against Nick Saban, I got to believe Georgia's the play here, Marco.
Well, I agree with you, Prez. You look at this game, and we all know what happened last year in a championship game. Georgia was taking it to them. They had Alabama on the ropes, and let's give Nick Saban credit. I mean, not many coaches would make a coaching change in the national championship game at halftime, and it worked out for him. And
a quarterback change.
Yeah, to do that, and he's been the starting quarterback ever since, and we know how well Alabama's played. But the one thing about it is most teams, when they line up against Alabama, let's face it, they're going to be intimidated, Prez. Alabama's, been the best team in football for the last, 5 years. But Georgia's not going to be. They know they can go toe-to-toe with Alabama. We know about what has to happen with the playoffs. Alabama, it doesn't matter if they win or lose this game, Prez, they're one of the top four. They're not dropping out of the top four. So you can say, well, that's maybe a plus for them. They can play loose. That's true. But for Georgia, they have to win this game to get in, or you would have to have both Oklahoma and Ohio State lose for them maybe to stay and hang on for the number 4 spot. But even at that would be a stretch. I like them. They play great defense. This is a team that this year they've held every opponent but one to 29 points or less. And 8 of those 12 opponents they held to 17 or less. The only team that topped 29 was LSU, and they were aided by 4 turnovers in that game, Prez. I like Georgia plus the points here. I've seen a little bit of movement on this game this morning starting to come down. A lot of the sharps were waiting to get a 14, hoping it was going to get there. It never got there, and if it did, it was just for a tick because right away they'll grab the 14. But Georgia is the side plus the points.
I agree with that, and I also lean on under the total of 63.5. Marco, Ohio State, I mean, listen, they could have put up 80 last week against Michigan. They played their first and pretty much only complete football game from start to finish. They looked really good, but you have to take the whole season into account. This is a team that has struggled all season. They barely beat Maryland, 2-point conversion away from being 10-2. And now they're playing the Purple Cats. What are you laughing at? Who are you looking at?
Lori's sneaking into the background with a Alabama T-shirt. She's trying to get it into camera, but she doesn't want to get on camera, so she's like, wait, you have to come closer if you want to get your Alabama shirt in there. You got to come closer. They're not going to see you. There it comes.
There. Oh, my God, on a hanger.
Yeah, because that's her dad's team. So she's camera shy. She doesn't want to come on.
No, I haven't.
But this Ohio State game, this is the one that I wanted to talk to you about today because there's a couple different things going on with this game. First of all, we're hearing all week about style points, Prez.
Yes.
And that Ohio State has to run up the score and all of this. I want to make the listeners aware of something first before you buy into that style point. Understand this is the last game of the day. So, yes, Ohio State's going to know what is in front of them and what they need to do. But if Georgia pulls an upset, I don't care what Ohio State does. It's not going to matter. They're not getting in if Georgia wins. If Oklahoma loses, this changes. If Georgia loses and Oklahoma loses to Texas, this changes everything for Ohio State because now all of a sudden, Prez, you don't need the style points. All you have to do is win this game, and you're going to leapfrog into the number 4 spot. So all these people thinking they're going to run the score up, if it comes down that they just have to win and they're in, and that could very well happen. Texas could upset Oklahoma. They did it earlier in the year, and, we're asking a lot of Georgia to beat Alabama. I don't want to be laying the points with Ohio State. I think you should wait and see how that first game unfolds with Oklahoma and see where you're at. And in fact, even if they do need to win, as you said, they've had one good game. You've heard me say it 100 times, Prez, that no team's ever as good as their best game, and they're not as bad as their worst game. We saw Ohio State's best game. But I got to say, once again, Coach Harbaugh, Jim Harbaugh, Urban Meyer bends him over and slaps his ass and says, "Who's your daddy?" Because he just owns him. And the game plan that Harbaugh had against Urban Meyer last week was ridiculous. You don't run the football 40 times against a team that's okay against the run. Their weakness is the pass, and they didn't utilize attacking that. Northwestern's going to be much smarter than that. And do you know the stat on Northwestern this year? If you blindly bet the underdog in every Northwestern game, you're 11-0-1 against the spread. This line is way too high, in my opinion. I think you've got to play Northwestern at the bigger number, and especially if Oklahoma loses and Georgia loses and you're kicking off here, they just got to win the game, and then it's a whole different mindset.
Marco, let's talk some NFL football. You were on Tennessee on Monday night. I was on Houston with a 5-star. So let's start with this Houston game. Minus 5.5 against Cleveland. We've spoken about this game a bit this week. You know, Cleveland's coming off of 2 really strong performances, albeit against probably the 2 worst defenses in the league. And I think that's really the key to this game, Marco. You know, Baker Mayfield's passing rating is incredible right now, and they are playing great. But, man, J.J. Watt literally camped in the backfield of Tennessee last week. He's going to do it again this week. I don't think Cleveland knows what's going to hit him defensively.
Well, Prez, obviously Houston is a much better team than Houston, but there's a couple things that I got to point out to you. Since they fired Hugh Jackson and got rid of Todd Haley, who is basically an ass clown, okay, I was glad to see him leave Pittsburgh. And look, since he's left Pittsburgh, look how much more productive the Steeler offense is this year since he left. Now you look at the last 3 games of Baker Mayfield. He's had his 3 best games of his career in consecutive weeks after he's gone. They're playing with a new sense of confidence. They're playing with pride, and I think they're trying to prove a point of how bad they were under the last coaching regime. But the thing that I want to point out about this game, in that Monday night game for Houston, and you were 100% correct. They were the better team. They knocked Tennessee all over the field. That was a monster game for Houston. They don't get a lot of primetime games. They win that game on primetime. It was their statement game. Let's not forget that over the weekend, their beloved owner passed away. So it was a very motivational game, an emotional game for them. And then the fact that they beat Tennessee opened up a 2-game lead in the division, and the team that's closest to them now, Indianapolis, they already beat. So in essence, they have like a 3-game lead because they own the tiebreaker right now. This is a letdown spot for Houston, in my opinion. You know that I love to look at stats, and you always do, but I am also a situational handicapper, and this is the worst situation for Houston. I'm going to throw out my favorite phrase. Right now, they come into this game all fat and sassy off that Monday night win and a comfortable lead in their division.
So basically, they come in as Marco.
Fat and sassy, but Cleveland gets the money with the points here.
What do you think about the total, Marco? It came out at 45. It's now 47.5. Houston's putting up a ton of points. I think this game is going over the total.
I would agree with it going over the total, because if you come out with a lack of effort, okay, you're going to see that more on the defensive side of the football. And we saw the defensive effort that Houston had last week. That's where they would be flat. And as I said, right now, Cleveland's offense is clicking. Baker Mayfield's playing well. And this is a game that Cleveland, out of the playoff picture, Prez, they can take chances. They can gamble maybe on 4th and 2s and stuff and go for stuff. I agree with the over. Cleveland and over would be the play.
Okay, let's talk about the Sunday night game. I know you're a huge Pittsburgh Steeler fan, but unlike me, who would never bet against the Toronto Maple Leafs, you are happy to bet against the Steelers. They're minus 3.5 against what I think is one of the best teams in football. Pittsburgh struggled last week. They struggled the week before. The Chargers haven't struggled in a long while. The Chargers are getting the hook. I think this is a 3-point game, Marco. So I like the dog in this spot. What are your thoughts?
Well, you point out the Steelers the last 2 weeks, and you're 100% correct, Prez. But I got to point out the Steelers are not the same team on the road as they are at home. Both of those games were on the road. I also want to point out the fact that you look at the Chargers, everybody's talking about how good their defense is playing. Have you looked at the lineup of who the Chargers have played in the last 7-8 weeks? I think they got Oakland twice. They played Arizona. They played Denver, not a good defense. They have not faced an explosive offense in 8 weeks. This is the best offense that they have faced. Now, I have no problem going against the Steelers. I've done it many times during this season. I was on Denver last week, and I'll be the first to admit I was on Denver because Denver was in the right spot against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh was back-to-back road games, playing in the altitude, coming off that big revenge game against Jacksonville the week before. But Pittsburgh shot themselves in the foot. I never should have won that game. It's funny, last Sunday, and I know you were on the game I'm going to bring up. I went 1-1 last Sunday. The game I lost, I should have won, and the game I won, I should have lost. That's how crazy the NFL is. I had Carolina. You were on them too.
We don't discuss that game.
Yeah,
they are banned. They are banned.
They are banned from the podcast? Okay. Yeah. Well, going back to this one, the Chargers, I don't know how they're going to stop the Steeler offense. The Steelers are just phenomenal at home, and especially in primetime games. When they play at Heinz Field, this is a team that just doesn't lose on primetime games, Sunday night games, Thursday night games, Monday night games. You saw what they did earlier this year. I can't say that team's name, but when they played that team that's down south that ends in Panthers, they blew them out on this
rhymes
field.
With Carolina?
Yeah, it does. How do you stop Antonio Brown, Juju?
So we get it. You like Pittsburgh minus the 3.5, but I mean, what I'm hearing from you is over the total as well. And Marco, this total came out at 56. It's been bet down to 51.5. Melvin Gordon is not playing in this game, which puts a lot of pressure on Phillip Rivers to throw the ball downfield. I got to think that with Pittsburgh's offense in full swing and the Chargers able to keep up with teams to some degree, that this is a game that we could easily see get into the 60s.
It could. That opening number was really high. And I think, we're going to start seeing an overreaction to the market because of the Rams, the KCs that are putting up all these monster numbers. For the Chargers, the key is, you're right, without Melvin Gordon, you're going to expect they're going to have to pass the football more. And if the Steelers get out to a quick start, last week, they had over 500 yards of offense, but Ben, with all of the interceptions and the fumble through the end zone, and I don't have to tell you, Prez, when you're betting a total, turnovers are key, and it's key where it's at because, like the Atlanta game a couple weeks ago or on Thursday Night Football against the Saints.
We don't mention Atlanta.
I had Atlanta in that one too. 4 turnovers, 3 of them. 2 of them were inside the 5. 1 of them was inside the 20, but it's when they're scoring. So you take a drive, you use up minutes, and then you don't get points on the board. And on the flip side, if you fumble on the other side of the field and you got the under and you set them up on a short field, you know how that works out too. So if Pittsburgh doesn't turn it over and they get that early lead, it's going to change the tempo of the game because I did it. I thought I was going to get through it without calling the Chargers San Diego, but the LA Chargers will have to, match points, and then you could see the shootout.
Marco, it's been a long show, but we still have to talk about one more game. Let's just summarize the promos. You got a big college football game going tonight, Friday night. Use the promo code MD10. That's MD10. It's $10 for his play. And Bobby Liggs, who is 31-17 in NFL, you get his entire season in playoffs for $199, which is ridiculous. Use the promo code Bobby199. Last up, and let's keep this super short, the sexiest game of the week, Tom Brady against Kirk Cousins. New England came out at -7. That line didn't last long. It's now down to -5, and the over and under is a hair off of 50.
Yeah, I know you, Prez, you don't like betting against Belichick and Brady, the BB boys. And, that's wise. You're going to make money back, staying with those guys. But you know what? Last week, this New England team, they're not the New England teams we've seen in the past. They're a very vulnerable team on the road. They're still getting it done at home. But look at a couple of those home games, Prez. They went toe-to-toe with Kansas City. with a rookie quarterback, went in there and traded points with Tom Brady, a 43-40 game. And then a couple weeks ago against Green Bay, they win by 2 touchdowns. That's a very misleading score in that game. If you remember watching it, Green Bay, with the game tied, was driving and had a turnover that New England recovered and then ended up going the other way for a touchdown. And then they used a trick play in the fourth quarter where Green Bay was expecting them to milk clock. They ran a gimmick play where Edelman threw a pass for a big play, set up the last touchdown. If Kirk Cousins has a clean game, and that's a big if because he is turnover prone, Minnesota can go in there and win. They're the better defense, getting points. That's a formula I like. I don't know if this game makes my card, Prez, or not, but I'm on the Minnesota side.
He's Marco. I'm the Prez, and the week of Morning Joe and the Pro is over. We got a big week next week. Teddy will be on the Monday show. We got the NHL show on Tuesday with Carmine Bianco and Andrew McGinnis. Wednesday will be Dave Koken, and we are trying to bring on a bookmaker as well. Thursday, we're going to have the UFC guy, Kyle, who I have a full-on man crush over, admitted one. And Marco, like always, will end the week on Friday. Guys, make sure to comment. Catch Marco on Twitter. Marco, give out your Twitter handle.
It's Marco in Vegas, and don't forget today we didn't do it last night, Prez. We normally tape our weekly WagerTalk podcast, but we had a studio conflict. I'm leaving here when I'm done with you, and we're heading to the studio, so we will have the podcast up later today with Dave Koken and Ralph Michaels. So be sure to tune in for that.
Awesome. I'm actually going to try get Ralph on next week. Thanks for listening, everyone, and have the absolute best weekend of betting ever. And check out my 17-year-old daughter's website, m2designs.ca, not .com, .ca, because we are Canadian. Marco, be well, my friend. Thank you.
All right, I'll miss that dead money of yours here.
Yeah,
poker.
blah, 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 blah.
Take it easy.